Young millionaire sees a homeless woman with a baby in the rain and gives her the key to his house. But first, remember to subscribe to our channel so we can keep sharing incredible stories. Ethan Carter, a young, wealthy entrepreneur of 27, was on his way home, driving through the deserted, rain-soaked streets of New York City. He was used to a world of luxury and sharp efficiency, a world where everything was controlled and predictable. But tonight, that world collided with one he had rarely stopped to notice. At a red light, Ethan's gaze shifted toward the shadows under a nearby building. There, huddled against the biting wind and relentless rain, was a young woman holding a small child, desperately clutching her worn coat around the baby's tiny body. Her face was obscured, but her posture spoke of exhaustion and despair. Something about the sight pulled at Ethan's heart in a way he hadn't anticipated, and before he could talk himself out of it, he pulled his car to the curb and got out. The woman, Molly, looked up, startled and defensive, as if she expected to be scolded for loitering. But Ethan's expression was soft, his face marked by concern rather than irritation. He hesitated only a moment before speaking. "Miss, do you need a place to stay tonight? It's freezing out here," he said, his voice carrying a sincerity that was rare in his world of business meetings and boardrooms. Molly seemed taken aback, her eyes darting to the baby in her arms. She clutched the child tighter, as if afraid Ethan might mean harm. Her life on the streets had taught her not to trust strangers easily. I don't know," she mumbled, glancing away, half hoping he'd walk on and leave her be. Ethan sensed her reluctance, but gently pressed, pulling a key from his pocket and holding it out to her. "Please, just for the night. My place is empty. You'll have a warm bed and food. It's the least I can offer." Molly's guard wavered, and finally, as if drawn by the sense of safety he exuded, she accepted the key, holding it in trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible over the sound of the rain. Ethan gave her the address and stepped back, watching as she bundled herself and the baby tighter, her figure slowly disappearing into the misty cityscape. As he returned to his car, a strange feeling lingered. He wasn't entirely sure why he'd done it, but a part of him knew this moment was going to change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Early the next morning, Ethan found himself pacing in his penthouse, glancing at his phone every few minutes, wondering if Molly and the baby had made it there safely. He knew it was unlikely she'd call, but a part of him needed to know they were all right. Unable to shake the thought, he decided to stop by his apartment to check on them. When he opened the door, he found Molly in the living room, holding the baby and rocking gently in a chair. She looked at him, eyes cautious but grateful, her expression softening in acknowledgement of his kindness. The baby, a small boy bundled in blankets, peeked up at Ethan with an intense gaze. Despite his tiny frame, his eyes were startlingly familiar, sending a strange jolt through Ethan. "Thank you," Molly said quietly as Ethan walked in. I didn't think anyone would offer something like this." Ethan gave her a small smile, gesturing to the kitchen. "I'm glad you could find some comfort here. Please help yourself to anything you need." As they spoke, Ethan noticed a small mark on the baby's wrist as he stretched his little hand from the blanket, a faint birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. He felt a pang of recognition that was hard to place, but he brushed it off as a coincidence. The baby continued to watch Ethan, his large, dark eyes following every movement. Ethan couldn't shake the odd sense that the child knew more than he let on. There was a depth, a weight to the baby's gaze that struck Ethan as peculiar. Does he have a name?" Ethan asked, trying to dispel the odd silence that had settled between them. "Charlie," Molly replied, her voice almost a whisper. She seemed hesitant, as if the name held secrets of its own. Ethan's gaze softened, and without entirely knowing why, he offered, "You can stay here as long as you need." He couldn't quite explain it, but a connection, one he couldn't name, was pulling him toward the baby. It was as if some unknown force was urging him to keep them both close, to uncover the story this woman and child seemed to carry. Over the following days, Ethan found himself returning to the penthouse more often, bringing Molly and Charlie clothes, groceries, and other essentials. He reassured himself that he was just helping them out of a rough spot. Yet each time he saw little Charlie, he couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling of familiarity, like something tugging at memories he couldn't quite grasp. On one visit, Ethan found Molly and Charlie in the sunlight by the large bay window. Molly was reading quietly, while Charlie gurgled in delight at the shadows dancing on the floor. Ethan watched them for a moment, feeling an unexpected warmth fill his chest. He couldn't deny that the time he'd been spending with them had filled a strange emptiness he hadn't even realized he had. "Ethan, why are you doing all this for us?" Molly asked suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. He hesitated, surprised by her directness. Honestly, I don't know. Something about you two just feels right." He glanced at Charlie, who gazed up at him with the same curious intensity as the first day. "Like maybe you were meant to be here." Molly nodded slowly, seeming to weigh her words. "I haven't had anyone look after us in a long time. Charlie and we've been on our own." Her voice was layered with weariness, but also gratitude. "Sometimes it's felt like he and I are all we have left." Ethan's heart ached at her words. "Well, you have me now," he said softly, surprising himself. It felt more than genuine. It felt essential. As he looked at Charlie, Ethan felt an overpowering urge to understand why he was drawn to them, particularly to the boy. On impulse, he asked, "Would you mind if I took Charlie for a walk around the building?" He wanted time alone with the child, a chance to make sense of the odd connection he felt. Molly agreed, watching them both with a small smile as Ethan held Charlie close, the little boy reaching up to pat his cheek with tiny fingers. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in Charlie's bright eyes was an answer, waiting to be uncovered. Ethan's curiosity deepened after his walk with Charlie. His desire for answers eventually led him to consult a close friend, Daniel, a private investigator with a knack for uncovering hard-to-reach truths. Although he felt hesitant and uncertain about involving anyone else, something within him knew he couldn't let this go without understanding more about the mother and her son. After sharing his concerns, Daniel listened carefully, then nodded with a thoughtful frown. "I can help, Ethan. If there's something here, we'll find it. But are you ready for whatever we might uncover?" Ethan hesitated, but the strange bond he felt with Charlie overpowered any second thoughts. "Yes, I need to know. Please just see what you can find about Molly and Charlie's past." Days later, Daniel returned with news that was as shocking as it was revealing. "Ethan, I found something unusual." He handed Ethan a folder with various documents and photos. Ethan's eyes widened as he read the contents, each line more astonishing than the last. "Molly had once been connected to your father," Daniel said cautiously. "They met years ago, before your father married your mother. But their relationship was hidden, and it seems they had a child." Ethan's mind spun as he pieced together the shocking revelation. He'd never known about any of this, and it was hard to believe. But as he thought back to the odd birthmark on Charlie's wrist, the familiar feeling that had haunted him since that rainy night now took on a painful clarity. "Charlie. He's my brother," Ethan whispered, the realization settling heavily. His father had kept this child a secret, a part of their family that had been hidden away. Ethan's heart pounded, wrestling with a mix of emotions, anger at his father for keeping such a secret, but also an overwhelming protectiveness toward Charlie. There was no question in his mind now. Charlie and Molly were family, and he would do everything in his power to ensure they were never left in the cold again. Now Ethan knew what he had to do. He had to reveal the truth to Molly and to himself, no matter the consequences. Ethan returned to his penthouse that evening with a sense of purpose, but also a quiet dread, uncertain of how Molly would react to the truth he'd uncovered. She was in the living room, rocking Charlie, who had dozed off in her arms. At the sound of his footsteps, Molly looked up, concern flickering across her face at the solemn expression he wore. I found something out," Ethan began, searching for the right words. "About Charlie and about us." Molly's brows knit in confusion, and Ethan slowly explained the story of his investigation, his father's hidden connection to her, and the unmistakable bond between him and the baby. As his words sunk in, Molly's face moved through shock, grief, and finally, a quiet acceptance. "Your father?" she whispered, eyes dropping to the floor, her voice laced with sadness. "He was the only one who helped us when we had no one. But I never imagined that Charlie would have family, real family." A heavy silence filled the room as the two grappled with the truth that had redefined everything they thought they knew. Ethan looked at her with new determination, feeling more certain than ever of the path he wanted to take. "Molly," he said gently, "you and Charlie don't have to do this alone anymore. I want you to stay, both of you. We're family now, and I'll make sure you never have to worry about where you'll go or how you'll survive." Molly's eyes shimmered with tears, and she reached for Ethan's hand. "You have no idea how much this means to us. I was ready to leave at the first sign of trouble. But now—" Her gaze softened as she looked down at Charlie, peacefully asleep in her arms. "Now we have hope." In the days that followed, Ethan took steps to ensure Molly and Charlie's well-being. He set up a trust for Charlie's future, helping Molly find stability and opening doors to opportunities she had never imagined. Slowly, the three of them began to forge a life together. They shared laughter, meals, and moments of quiet joy, the bond between them deepening with each passing day. Ethan found himself changed, his once solitary life transformed by a single act of kindness that had uncovered family and love he didn't know he needed. What had begun as a rainy night of chance had ended as a story of family, unity, and healing. And as he watched little Charlie grow, Ethan knew he'd found something far more valuable than any fortune he could ever earn, a family born of second chances and the unexpected magic of the human heart.